What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Huddle. I am your host, Andrew Avery, better known as Ninja. With me, as always, is Tony Farmer. Tony, always sort of crappy when NFL season is done. Extra crappy this year because our beloved 49ers lost. But sports betting is ramping up. We've had a great run with March Madness. We've got Major League Baseball starting up tomorrow, Thursday, the real opening day. The Soul games are good, but that's not real opening day. We're going to talk about all of it here on the show today. But Tony, Sweet 16 coming up. Brackets busted for many folks with Kentucky going out. How does your Final Four look knowing the 16 teams that we've got? What are you looking at for winners in all four regions?
Well, first of all, my bracket is beyond busted.
Oh, yeah.
It is so ugly at this point. It is hideous. If you ask me to, come up with a Final Four now, I think it would be pretty chalky. I've got to go with UConn. That path is even easier now with Auburn out of there. You've got to like them. UNC, I think you could make an argument for Arizona, but I'll put UNC in there. Purdue, who I had in the Final Four all along, and then Marquette would be my fourth team. So pretty chalk, other than Marquette, which is a 2 seed, so they're also pretty chalky as well. But those would be the Final Four. Do I feel great about it? No, I could definitely see a couple of those teams having some missteps along the way. But you gave me 4 bullets; those are the 4 that I'd choose right there.
We're going to talk about some of the games we're looking at. No picks from us today. We're going to reserve the picks for our Twitter/X Spaces content. We've been going live every game day. We've had some great guests on. We've had some real good conversations about the tournament. So we will be live tomorrow, 11:30 Eastern, Thursday, to talk about the Thursday board, to talk about the Sweet 16. For me, dude, I've got to stick with Iowa State. I was sort of high on them at the beginning, so I'm going to stick with them out of the East. I know UConn's look good, but I'll stick with Iowa State. I'm going to go Arizona from the West. I have to. They were my rollover team before the tournament when me, you, and Ian McMillan talked about the rollover method. In the South, Houston is gettable. Jamal Shed has been a beast, but they can be beat. So I'm going to co-sign your team, I think. I'm going to go with Marquette out of that region. Duke was incredible last game. NC State, fun team. But I think it's Marquette. Then in the Midwest, I know Purdue has been probably the most dominant team so far, but I think the winner of that Creighton-Tennessee game, as we sit here today, I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think we might get a statement game from Dalton Connect. Just 5 of 18 from the floor against Texas, 1 of 8 from 3 in that game. So I think a big game, a big statement game is coming from him. And I think the Tennessee defense is going to swarm Creighton, but we're not going to talk about picks. So yeah, Iowa State, Arizona, Marquette, and then Tennessee. So I'm going to go with those.
I'm glad I got you on the Marquette bandwagon. I'm going to take all the credit for that. Yeah. You were never anti-Marquette, but I gave them out on the one of our first X shows at 25-1 to win the tournament. After they won their first round game, they went out to 20-1. Latest I've seen them is around 15 or 16-1. So I think people are starting to open their eyes to them. So my question for you, Andrew, is what has kind of opened your eyes to Marquette? Again, you were never against them, but what is impressing you so far?
I think it's largely been that bracket has sort of thinned out, but watching that Colorado game was sort of, I think that's what brought me around. They get really, really good point guard play, maybe some of the best of the tournament so far. They look really good. They got a favorable matchup against NC State as well. Just good coaching, good balance, and really good point guard play from that team. And that dude, Kopak, he gets to the basket. Kolek, sorry. Yep. He gets to the hoop. He can make things happen around the rim, even though he's undersized. And he can make plays off the pass. So really good balance with that Marquette team. So that's sort of what I sort of earmarked with them and what I like about them sort of to get to the Final Four and win that region. So a good shout by you. You were high on them early, like you said. Another thing that's sort of interesting is MOP, Most Outstanding Player of the Tournament betting markets. Our guy Nick Holtz at Oddshark has been updating that article on the website over at oddshark.com. Some interesting stuff though. So Tony, at my book, Purdue is plus 650 to win the championship. So if folks out there do like Purdue, why not take a guy like Zach Edey for MOP, who's around 8-1? Is this something that bettors should be sort of looking at if they're dabbling in futures markets?
All right, we say it all the time, Andrew, but always shop around, because you just said he's Purdue 650 and he's plus 800 in some markets. I saw a shop this morning where he was plus 650 and Purdue is plus 650. Yeah. So obviously, if you're given those two choices, you'd rather take the team, because there are unlikely, but there are avenues that Purdue could win and he's not the MOP. So always shop around for the best price. I think it depends, to answer your question more directly, though. How do you feel about this Purdue team? This is the team that let people down last year, but looks really darn good. Really good. If I'm going to bet in this market, which I'm not, I'm going to go a little bit further down the board and look at a guy like Tyler Kolek, who we brought up earlier, at 25-1. If you have conviction in Marquette, maybe Armando Bacot at 40-1. If you have conviction in UNC, those are two teams, to consider. I don't have a ton of conviction in UNC to win it all, but if you do, that's certainly a market to consider there. So yeah, it's important to consider what the team's chances are as well. I think, you correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think it was the last Super Bowl. I think it was the 49ers Chiefs Super Bowl, where like at some shops, the Chiefs were like plus 120 and Mahomes was like minus 110 to win the MVP. Yeah. And at that point, it's a no-brainer. You're throwing your money away if you're betting it on Mahomes. So keep that sort of dynamic in mind and always consider the team's odds when you're making those MOP bets, because some of them are just not a good deal.
Another interesting one, Houston at my shop, plus 500 in outright markets. But then Jamal Shed, 12-1 for MOP. Cryer is 14-1. So some decent value there. And two schools, just as an example, showing some decent value in MOP markets if you like said school to go all the way and win this thing. So let's get into Sweet 16. Like I said, we're going to get a bit more in-depth tomorrow on our spaces, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. But I do just want to quickly talk about some of these matchups coming up. So Thursday, we get a rematch of last year's final with San Diego State as 11-point dogs here, Tony, against UConn. Alabama UNC is going to be incredibly fun. Total of 173.5 in that one. Illinois Iowa State. So we get the number one KenPom defense against the number one KenPom offense after KenPom refreshed their information. Then Friday, we've got the only double-digit seed, NC State, going against your boys Marquette. Purdue, like we talked about, after a few years of incredible fails, have finally put it together, or seemingly has after 2 games. Duke Houston is a good-looking one. But then game of the day, like I alluded to earlier, Creighton, Tennessee. So Tony, what games are you looking forward to the most in this round, Sweet 16?
So betting aside, I do think that the UConn-San Diego State matchup is fun because it's a rematch of last year's national championship game. So I don't think it's going to be one of the more competitive games, but if that game's close with 5 minutes to go, that's going to be must-see TV at that point, right? Oh my God, San Diego State is exacting revenge and UConn's choking. I mean, that's a lot of storylines there, and that could be really fun to watch. I think Duke-Houston is going to be interesting. You alluded to this before, that Houston can be shaky, although they're one of the top KenPom teams. Like, there's just something about them that people don't have a ton of faith in Houston going all the way. So you've got this vulnerable Houston team against Duke. Duke's a 4-point underdog. I think they're live for an upset here. And so that's going to potentially be a really fun game to watch too, because Duke is always the team that's like, in the past, the team to watch. And people are kind of sleeping on them. A lot of people don't have them in the national championship game this go around. And so maybe we're sleeping on Duke, as silly as that would have sounded 3 or 4 years ago.
I think you might be right. I certainly was. I was all over James Madison in the round of 32, and Duke came out and sort of played like those vintage Coach K teams, like hitting the three at a really, really efficient rate. And even the first half, I was like, well, this is unsustainable. Like, they're not going to come out in the second half and do this, or we're going to see some regression in those stats. And sure enough, we didn't. And they ran away with that game quick and fast. You're right. I do think there's a potential upset spot there. But again, I might be sleeping on Duke. Sitting here today, going into the Sweet 16, I still like Houston in that round. I do personally think my favorite pick right now, and again, nothing official until we get on Spaces tomorrow, but UNC -3.5 against a very exposable on the defensive end Alabama team. Like, that has to be the play of the week, right?
That's an interest that the fireworks in that game, the potential for fireworks in that game. When you're talking about strictly entertainment value, bets aside, that's going to be a fun one to watch for sure. The more we talk about it, I'm like, we're going to have some fun action because the Illinois Iowa State game, that's a game that I have to really think about for the survivor pool that I'm in. Like, which way do I go with that game? It's kind of an important domino, and I'm stuck on it. I don't have a lot of conviction either way. And when you got a game with a 1.5 point spread and you don't have a lot of conviction, that means it should be a fun, close game to watch. Yep,
for sure. Are you basketball, especially NBA, but college basketball for sure? But it is a game of peaks and valleys. Any team can go on a given run at any point throughout the game. Your team can go ice cold. Do you find yourself in-game betting these March Madness games at all? Or are you just, locking your pregame bets in and then that's it for you?
Yeah, definitely doing a little in-game betting for sure. I like when there's, foul trouble scenarios. Like if a team is in foul trouble early in the game and you know that either they're going to have to take their starters out or their starters are going to be playing tentatively, that's an angle to keep an eye on. And remember, Ken Pom does a great job of telling you like how many minutes the bench has played throughout the season. So you can see that, not only is this team's two best players in foul trouble, they have a really shallow bench as well. Also, if there's a situation where a team's down by a lot, I like taking the dog with the points in a situation like that if there's a good explanation of why they got down for a lot. You know what I'm saying? If it's a situation where, they haven't looked good, but they've got a great head coach who can make adjustments at halftime. Or it's like, this is a great three-point shooting team. They're getting open looks. It's not that the defense is playing that well. They're getting open looks and the shots just aren't falling. I see a path there where the shots will eventually start to fall in the second half, and I might take a shot on an underdog like that. But yeah, live betting is really important. I haven't needed to do a lot of this so far in this tournament, but live betting, be careful with this, but it can also get you out of a bad situation. Yeah. If you've got a big futures pick on a team that you have a huge investment in and they're about to go down in the second round, you can kind of hedge live and get yourself out of trouble there. You can get yourself in more trouble if you don't do it the right way. So again, I caution you to be careful with it, but that can be a valuable tool for live betting as well.
Noticeable lack of a, de facto Cinderella as we approach the Sweet 16. So I know we do have NC State, NC State's a pretty big basketball school, so calling them a Cinderella is tough for me. So Cinderella by double-digit seed only, but really, come on. We have all the ones, we have all the twos. Kentucky and Baylor are the 2-3 seeds that got bounced. Pretty chalky Sweet 16 here, Tony. So I ask you, what do you prefer? Do you like this chalky 16 teams left standing now, or do you miss that? If Oakland made it this far, do you like that narrative of a Cinderella story going into the Sweet 16?
Yeah, give me the Cinderella story, man. I'm kind of missing it right now at this point. With the Cinderella situations, you also get chaos. And so I like rooting for chaos. I like rooting for the dogs. To me, that's better television. That's better entertainment when I can go into a Sweet 16 and Elite 8 with a team that's never gotten this far in the tournament, with a school. It's like a David versus Goliath because their school's so small or the conference that they play in. To me, that's the best television. I like betting aside, I like rooting for those dogs. I think that's way more fun.
I gotta disagree. There's something about the way this tournament has gone with the quality of basketball, the quality of offensive basketball, which, can be problematic in college, a la Virginia, what we've seen with the Virginia Cavaliers playing that slow tempo, grind it out, milk the clock kind of style. But we are seeing some high tempo, high octane basketball. I think what we have now with the 16 teams left standing, North Carolina State included, I think we have 16 high quality teams that are going to produce some high level basketball games and make it fun from a viewer standpoint. I think we're going to get treated to 8 really, really good basketball games. And if we had an Oakland, if we had a Grand Canyon or a James Madison, like we saw with James Madison in the round of 32, those teams would just get pummeled and it'd be a 30-point win, and we don't have that anymore. I think we're going to get really, really close games here, really, really tight. And the spreads, I think, San Diego State notwithstanding, are, reflect that, what we're going to get here in the Sweet 16. So yeah, narrative, romance, Sweet 16, sure. But play on the floor, I think what we've got is the best case scenario.
I see your logic. I hope you're right. Let's all cross our fingers that we get some good basketball here down the stretch. But let me ask you this. It's an Elite Eight game, and one of those Cinderellas is in it, and you have no rooting interest. You have no bets on the line. You don't care about either of these schools, and there's a minute left, and a team like a James Madison, one of these Cinderella teams, is in it. Are you not like secretly, as much as you want to see good basketball in the next round, are you not like secretly rooting? I feel like there's something in us that's just human nature where we gravitate toward those underdogs in those situations.
I get it. And to answer your question, probably yes. But we're still going to get that. What if San Diego State is down to a last possession? And if they do get that shot, that's a Cinderella story. Heaven forbid Arizona is down to a last possession situation against Clemson, who is a 6 seed, I believe. We're going to get that narrative. So those storylines are still there. We're just getting it at a higher level and, a bigger program than what we would have gotten with a Grand Canyon. You're right. Yes. Would be great television, great storylines, but we are still going to get those just with a higher program in the mix here.
A higher level or a watered down Cinderella story? It's not as exciting, man. I want to see a small school. I mean, what is the head coach's blood pressure in an Elite Eight game for a small school that's never even been to the tournament before, or maybe they went once and lost in the first round? Nobody's heard of any of these kids. I mean, that's just fun to watch that sweat, to see the fans in the stadium that are like, I went to this school, I didn't even know they had a basketball program, and somehow we're in the Sweet 16, man. That's March Madness to me.
So it's true. It's a good point. And I would love to see Oakland's coach, Campy, in that sort of situation. Like Oakland, a school that potentially most people didn't even know was actually in Michigan instead of California. But yeah, they were our sort of last hope. But still, man, I sort of love the field that we got here. I love the star power that's going to be on display. We got a lot of dudes that are mocking pretty high in NBA draft mocks. So, I think we're going to get spoiled with some high quality basketball. At least, like you said, fingers crossed. We may very well not be. We'll have to see. And we've got 4 days of really good basketball coming up. So, but really, Tony, what we've got to talk about here today on the Huddle are a couple big controversies in the sports betting world or sports betting adjacent world. One is over in Major League Baseball. We've had the Dodgers play 2 games, but it does involve the poster boy for Major League Baseball, Shohei Ohtani. The other is with Toronto Raptors forward Jontay Porter. But Tony, explain to me the Shohei Ohtani situation as you see it.
So, brief overview for people who don't know anything at all right now, if you somehow haven't been following this quickly. It originally came out that Shohei said he was a victim of massive theft by his interpreter, who by all accounts, I'm hearing he was very close with his interpreter. This isn't just an employee. This is a close friend. Yeah, exactly. They spent a lot of time together for multiple years. and some money went to an offshore sportsbook operation, a book that makes bets. Of course, baseball doesn't like its players being associated with gambling. And there's an investigation going on right now by Major League Baseball. There's a theory out there, I think it's a strong one, that this interpreter is the fall guy, because Shohei is saying, yeah, that money did go from my account, but it was to help my buddy out who apparently had some gambling debts or, something to that effect. So he's distancing himself away from it. You ask me my opinion, it sounds like a cover story to me. I mean, that's what it sounds like. I'm a cynical person. I'm gonna always lean toward not giving the people benefit of the doubt, especially when it's famous people, celebrities, and that's a bias that I haven't, and maybe that's not fair. But it is interesting as I talk to other people about this, sports fans and sports bettors, there's a lot of skepticism towards Shohei. Like, this is not an actual study that I did, but just like off the top of my head, kind of anecdotally, 80 to 90% of the people that I talk to seem to be like, oh yeah, there's something fishy going on with that Shohei situation. And maybe that's just the nature of sports bettors psychologically projecting. We love to bet, so we assume that Shohei must love to bet. Or, maybe there's something unfair going on there, but this seems fishy to me. This seems highly, highly fishy to me because, like we said, this is a close friend of his. Andrew, I consider you a friend, okay? We've been working together for a little while. When I've got a big bet going on. I mean, when I was in that Survivor contest, we were talking about it regularly, etc. Could you imagine these guys being close friends and the interpreter sweating out these bets, apparently had a gambling problem if there's that much debt involved, right? So he's, going to be moody. He's going to be distracted looking at scores. And if they're spending that much time together, how is Shohei oblivious to this going on? That is what is hard for me to believe.
So a few things about this story. I mean, there's a number of things that are really weird. But one is that an MLB reporter, I forget who, was talking to several of Shohei's former teammates with the Angels. All of them said there's zero chance that Shohei is betting because the dude knows nothing about other sports. And if the number being tossed around is $4.5 million. If you've racked up that much debt, you would think that you would know something about football, about the NFL, about college football or hockey or whatever has been bet on here. So that, sort of leads me down a path of maybe he's innocent. But then again, baseball players have been known to lie in the past. Let's be real. Another element to the Ippei story is that he had sort of disclosed, I believe, to the Angels that he was a graduate of one of the California schools. I believe it was UC Northridge or Riverside or something. But then that school has no recollection of him even being there. So maybe this dude is just a pathological liar and he gets down these webs of lies. And then another thing was, what was the third thing? I can't remember. But but you're right. Like Ippei and Shohei have been boys, I believe, since high school baseball. I think Ippei was playing with Shohei. So really, really long history with each other. Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out was that when you make this much money, celebrities, athletes, whomever, they're frequently victims of fraudulent activity in their bank accounts. Especially when there was a hockey player in the NHL, I can't remember who, and producer Steve, I know, will be on top of this, but I believe his parents were dipping into his account and basically stealing from the guy. I can't remember who it was only a couple years ago, but that had surfaced. But so there's a few elements here that are still really weird, but you're right, the cynic in me believes, because conversations in MLB dugouts, in MLB clubhouses, around, college football, over-unders, fantasy football, all these kind of things, they're present in MLB clubhouses. Of course they are. So maybe Shohei just got wrapped into it. I don't know, man, but it's very weird. And of anybody on any MLB roster that you would figure would be involved in this, Shohei would be the last name.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up the resume lying. I had heard that he also had in his resume that he was an interpreter for the Boston Red Sox, which he never was. The Red Sox came out and was like, nope, this isn't a thing. So it seems like multiple lies there. You're bringing me back down to earth a little bit, right? Originally, I was, and I still am, very skeptical of Shohei. But when you bring up that point about, athletes and famous people can be victims of this sort of stuff, it's a fair point. And I also want to throw out there, to play devil's advocate with my own thought here. How many times have we seen, even outside of sports, Andrew, how many times have we seen the media jump on a bandwagon and just tear someone to shreds?
Yes.
About this situation they were in? It was a misunderstanding. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that stinks for them. Not only were they a victim the first time, but that the media re-victimized them. So I don't want to be a part of that, because there's a chance, and I want to say that there is a chance that I'm wrong on this. And there is definitely a path that Shohei is the victim here. But my gut and my common sense is telling me that the story sounds fishy. You know what else was fishy, Andrew? The press conference. He will be taking no questions. He's going to be making a statement. That is someone that is truly a victim, I would think, would be more open to answering questions and not worried about getting caught off guard with a question from a pointed question from a reporter or something like that. So that, to me, added to a little bit of the skepticism as well.
But he also didn't need to put himself in front of the media at all. Like, he could have not had that press conference at all. You know what I mean? But by all accounts, his representatives, his team is cooperating with the investigation. So, it could be optics. I don't know. We don't know as we sit here today, but something is going to come out of this. What was it that Pete Rose sort of said the other day?
Yeah, I saw a Twitter video with Pete Rose, and he was just sitting with someone at dinner, and he's like, hey, Pete has something he wants to say. And this isn't a direct quote, because I saw it a couple days ago, but Pete Rose essentially said, like, I wish I had an interpreter in the 70s and 80s, and this would have all went away. Obviously, some bitterness from Pete Rose here. His career and his life, I don't want to say his life was destroyed, but absolutely tarnished, for sure. I don't know much about how he's living these days, but his reputation was tarnished, his life was tarnished, and then he sees this potentially, the investigation isn't over, but this may be getting swept under the rug, and you could understand why that would rub him the wrong way.
Yeah, Pete Rose, another hit from the MLB Hit King. And then it was Jack Johnson, by the way, the hockey player. Terrible story involving his parents there. Then in the NBA, the Jontay Porter story is wild. So the league is investigating a couple of betting irregularities involving his player prop markets, which is weird to begin with. There are a couple of games in particular where at least one book, on a couple of occasions, multiple, had sort of reported that, Parker under props, I think over under a half a three-pointer was the biggest money win for bettors on the days of those games. So one game he took himself out, citing an eye injury after like 4 minutes, and all his unders hit. Also weird is the fact that apparently this dude created a second Twitter account and was sort of giving out betting advice and crypto advice. This was back in 2022, before he was in the NBA. So which one is the crazier story here, Tony?
The Shohei one by far is the crazier story, just because of his star power. I mean, the best player in Major League Baseball, one of the best players in Major League Baseball history. He just signed the contract, so the timing on it is crazy. He's in a new market now. The intrigue with, is he lying, etc. The other one in the NBA, it's cut and dry. It's kind of like almost what you expected. Like when sports betting started to be legalized, like you knew there was going to be a couple of these whack-a-mole things that popped up that leagues were going to have to deal with. And this one is interesting. The fact that he took himself out of, I heard 2 different games. I did hear the I one. I think there was another game that he took himself out after a couple of minutes to potentially make those unders hit. That's interesting. Andrew, I wonder how how leagues are finding out about this stuff. Like, I do know when there was that player in the NFL who got caught, I believe I heard that a sports book actually reported it to the NFL. And I wonder if when there's these betting irregularities, like who the heck is betting this much money on this, if the books are actually reporting these things, if in their agreements, there's a lot of advertising dollars shared with these leagues. I wonder if they're reporting suspicious activity, and that's how leagues are finding out. That's an interesting angle too.
So I'm pretty sure I read that in the NBA, each team has their own sort of de facto representative for the sports betting space. So each team is represented by somebody that is sort of the liaison potentially between books and the franchise. I don't know if the responsibility or the onus falls on that representative to potentially report these sort of things. I don't know if the NFL has a similar structure in place, but I'm pretty sure that I did read that the NBA does have this in place. But the thing is, these players are getting caught. So in one aspect, it's working. The sort of measures that are in place to flag these are being proved to be effective. So I think that's a good thing then, that it is working. We got to move on here. I do want to talk about MLB. The real opening day, like we mentioned, is tomorrow. I, for one, cannot wait as an MLB fan. Always good to have MLB back in the mix. Always good to have a little day baseball as well. And I know you're a pretty big MLB betting guy. So what would you say are some of the biggest tips when it comes to handicapping MLB games?
I'd say, data is king with Major League Baseball betting. I'd be careful, though. Like, one of the things I've learned over the years is that the data is a lot more reliable later in the season, right? Because early in the season, if a pitcher has 2 starts, he might have had a little bit of rust, he might have had an injury in the offseason. It's tough to trust that data from the 3rd start based off of how he did in 1 or 2 starts, or even that 8th start based off how he did in the first 7 starts. But once you have a season-long amount of data, the data becomes a lot more credible and reliable. Because, Andrew, how many times have we seen a situation, whether you want to blame PEDs or whether you want to blame it being a contract year, where a guy comes out of nowhere? It's like, oh, he's a 12 home run guy a year, 12 or 13 home runs, and all of a sudden he hits 38 home runs. We can see these things pop out of nowhere. So trusting last year's data is tough. And I love, waiting until later in the season to make those moves. That said, early in the season, there can be these trends that if you notice them early on, they can be really valuable, because some teams don't take spring training as seriously. They're not as prepared for the season. They might have injuries coming into the start of the season. So like last year, we saw the A's really cold start. We saw the Rays really hot start. If you can identify those trends early enough and get on them before they swing the other way, it can be profitable. Another example was like when the MLB had those rule changes with, increasing stolen bases essentially and things like that, and the pitch clock, we started to see the overs hit, and the sports books couldn't adjust quick enough. They saw that it was happening and they were getting crushed on overs, and they were trying to adjust, but it wasn't enough. And you can jump on a trend like that early enough and kind of take advantage. A couple of resources that I can share with people. We talk so much with college basketball about like Ken Pom and Bart Torvik. For baseball, for me, Fangraphs is a very similar website that has a ton of really great data where you can splice it down and see how a player's been hitting in the last couple weeks. And then one that's maybe a little bit less well-known to bettors is baseballsavant.mlb.com. And that's got a lot of good like pitch arsenal data. So you can look at like, this pitcher has 4 pitches, a curveball, a sinker, a fastball. He throws the fastball 60% of the time, and then you can see the opposing lineup. You can look at their data and say, oh, this is a really good fastball hitting lineup. The players, 1 through 5 in the lineup all crush fastballs, and this guy relies on his fastball, and it's not even a particularly good fastball. You can look at stuff like that. I could go on and on talking about baseball forever, but another thing I'll throw out there real quick is the wind. That's big. You can look at these websites and see, is it a ground ball pitcher? Is it a fly ball pitcher? So if you're in a small ballpark, the wind is blowing out and it's a fly ball pitcher, and I've got a ground ball pitcher on the other side, I'm probably going to tend to lean toward, betting on that ground ball pitcher. So data's king. One more thing too, lineups. information is king with baseball too. These lineups are posted from beat writers on Twitter and all different, daily fantasy websites and stuff like that. And so if you can see that a couple of star players are out of the lineup and hit that, before the line is moved, that can be valuable too.
I know we've been super focused on March Madness the past couple of weeks, and we'll obviously be getting deep into MLB in the coming weeks. We did talk about a bunch of player prop futures markets a few weeks ago right here on the Huddle. But let's have a little fun real quick. Give me the Tony Farmer World Series exact matchup.
All right. Braves and Orioles.
Okay.
I think the Orioles are going to be really battle tested in the AL East because it is such a tough division, and I think that they're gonna make a run. And by the way, maybe this is just what I want to see because I think that'd be a fun matchup too. Seeing the Orioles in the World Series will be a lot of fun. But I just think the Dodgers. By the way, this Shohei stuff you got to start thinking about with MVP markets and things like that too. If there's a suspension, maybe there's someone else in the National League who you kind of bump up a couple notches with the betting. But anyways. Not just because of the Shohei news, but I just think the Braves are sort of getting overlooked. They were dominant throughout the regular season last year. I mean, in so many metrics, the Braves were really good. And because of the Dodgers' great offseason, people are giving them attention, rightfully so. But I think the Braves are being overlooked.
Yeah, Orioles, really good ball club. What they've done down the years, while being so bad and stacking their farm system with stud after stud. And there's more coming down the pipeline as well. They added Corbin Burns in free agency as well. So stud pitcher at the front end of the rotation. I like D-backs Yankees. Fangraph sort of projects the Yanks to have the fourth best record in baseball. And the D-backs are just one of the most exciting young teams in the game. They just added Jordan Montgomery late last night to the mix of that starting rotation. They have one of the best young players in the game in Corbin Carroll, of course. And on the other side, Juan Soto is going to be an absolute monster in Yankee Stadium this season. I also like the low-key additions of Verdugo and Trent Grisham as that fourth outfielder there. And look, these are impossible to predict, and there are a ton of contenders in the mix in this upcoming MLB season. But give me a little D-backs versus the Yankees. I also want to plug an MLB article where we break down a couple of futures plays. That'll be live on oddshark.com by the time you are watching this or hearing this. So make sure you read that for some of our MLB futures stuff. Plays from me, Tony, Ethan, and Mitch. By the way, make sure you check Ethan and Mitch out on their X Spaces content every Monday and Thursday, 12:30 Eastern in the afternoon, ahead of opening pitches when we do get some day games. They're going to be talking about everything you need to know: news, notes, stats, trends, bets, everything throughout the MLB season. I do want to talk a little NFL before we go here, Tony. Some big rule changes this week. Like, they were coming fast and furious this week. So break them down for me here. We had the hip drop tackle ban, and we have a new kickoff rule. What's going on there?
So the kickoff rule, for anybody that's familiar with the XFL, they're basically copy and pasting it from the XFL. The kickers kicking from the same area of the field, long kickoff. But now we've got these two lines of players lined up, I believe 10 yards apart from each other. And so the whole idea is that we want to increase the number of kickoffs because it's been kind of a boring play now, right? But also not increase the injuries along with it. So by not allowing these players to get the running start, we're going to decrease injuries. We're going to decrease touchbacks. I like it, man. I think it's going to make for a more exciting game. I think it's going to make the play a lot more exciting. You saw the Steelers came out and hired or signed one of the best kick returners of all time immediately after this rule change happened. So I thought that was interesting. And so I think it's gonna make things fun. The hip drop tackle, I don't like that one. That one, and you've seen a lot of former players and current players come out saying this as well. My concern with it is I think it gives the officials more ways that they can make a mistake. We've seen them in the past, like just recently, especially just make terrible mistakes. It's almost like it doesn't matter anymore which team's better because the official is going to make a stupid call in the fourth quarter. As bettors, we've all seen this. It's frustrating. Now you're giving them another avenue to make that mistake. Oh, was this a hip drop tackle or not? Or they missed this big hip drop tackle. And so I don't like that, on top of the fact that I think it's softening the league it's a tackle. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Andrew. I've been watching football all my life. I haven't heard the term hip drop tackle until the last couple of years. I just considered it a tackle. And so I don't like the fact that, the league is getting softer. It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, and definitely caters to more offense, which is obviously, what the folks want to see. Do you think there'll be an impact on, say, totals markets in the 2024 regular season?
Yeah, that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, the sports books are probably going to adjust appropriately. So it's tough to say like, week 1, there's going to be a bunch of overs because we don't know what those totals are set. But certainly keep an eye on that because there is a potential, not just because you're removing those tackles, but the defensive players are going to be worried about getting a penalty. So they're going to when they're in the middle of a tackle, they're going to have to adjust their body so they don't get a penalty, and that might lead to more broken tackles as well. So I do think there is a possibility that we see a lot more high-scoring games.
I believe NFL win totals have hit markets as well. We got to talk about that next week on the Huddle. We got to go through team by team and break down our thoughts on that. But we thank you all for watching or listening today on the Huddle. Little college hoops, MLB coming up. What a great time for sports bettors. Thank you all for watching or listening. We will be live on Spaces Thursday through Sunday, every game day, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. So join us there. We'll have guests, we'll have picks, everything you need for college hoops moving forward. Good luck with your bets, especially on the MLB board tomorrow, opening day. And we'll catch you next week right here on The Huddle.